Universal Casualty, Super Q,
los Miami Dolphins y tú,
rumbo al Super Bowl.
Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Son los Dolphins, nuestros Miami Dolphins, el team número 1 en toda la nación. Y son ellos orgullo de Miami y de todos los latinos en la capital del sol. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Este año no me hablen de los Redskins, no me hablen de los Chargers, ni de los Dallas Cowboys, porque los Dolphins son número 1 y lo demostrarán al llegar al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Nuestra línea está mejor que nunca y nuestra defensiva fue siempre la mejor. Y es por eso que yo no tengo duda que los Miami Dolphins ganarán el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl.
Universal Casualty
Y Super Q, los primeros. Bueno, caballero, todo el mundo que cante con nosotros. Dame una D, dame una O, dame una L, dame una P, una H, una I, una N, una S, que es lo que tenemos. Miami Dolphins. Me voy para el Super Bowl. 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 Me voy para el Super Bowl.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
There's a team that's in our hearts. We've got love that won't depart.
Dolphin fans, and welcome to the Same Old Dolphin Show, part of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. I'm Josh Katzker, and yet again, not with me today is my brother from the exact same mother, Aaron the Brain. He is, at this point, I would venture to say he is probably hours away from entering the state of New York, and he is just a few hours away from his arrival to central New York, where he and his wife will be moving into their new place tomorrow. So since he is in transit, he is yet again, unfortunately, not able to join us on the program today. But there is good news. I'm not here all by my lonesome to do the show with you. I have a special guest with me today, and that special guest is none other than the host of Dolphins Talk Weekly from right here at DolphinsTalk.com. He is the inimitable Kevin Dern. Kevin,
Ooh.
How are you?
Well, personally, I'm great. That's a good $3 word right there. But as a Dolphins fan, I think we've all seen better days. But I'm good.
That's for sure. I think all of us, I would agree with you that all of us as Dolphin fans, well, most of us as Dolphin fans have seen better days. I mean, there were better days last year than what we're dealing with right now. So we haven't been. There was a time where we were completely bereft of good news as Dolphin fans, and at least it hasn't been that bad recently. But right now, yeah, it's tough times as a Dolphin fan. But I'm glad to have you with us here this week to preview the Bills game. You know, it's funny. I've been wanting to get you on for a Bills preview show for a long time, ever since you did that series of shows on Dolphins Talk Weekly, where you were sort of documenting how the Dolphins were trying to catch up to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, the Chasing Buffalo series, man.
Yes.
I want to say that was the last year Flores was the head coach. Or
was it that long ago that you did that? I thought.
Yeah, it was pre-McDaniel, I want to say.
Well,
because I think, yeah.
And what's interesting is that the Dolphins appeared to be closing the gap with Buffalo. And I actually, while I don't know that I ever said it definitively, coming into the season, I said, there is an argument to be made that while I thought the Dolphins had taken a step back this year, just from a roster perspective, there was a possibility that this might actually be the year that the Dolphins still managed to catch the Bills, just because the Bills had also seemed to take a step back in the offseason, at least before we get to the season. But then you walk into the season and the Dolphins have clearly taken a step back from an offensive functionality standpoint. Then they lose Tua, and now he's back, and they lose a heartbreaker to Arizona because they are incapable of playing complementary football. And while this is happening, the Bills have a 2-week period where they kind of look a little sketchy. They look a little shaky, and they are an organization that clearly looks at their operation and goes, our pass catching game is not as good as we need it to be. It's a weakness. We've downgraded losing Stephon Diggs. We need to figure out a way to improve that unit. So they go out and they trade for Amari Cooper and they make it better. And now they're sitting there 6-2. They've got a 3.5 game lead over the Miami Dolphins as it stands.
Feels
coming into this game.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like they're just, it already feels like at this early stage that the division is Buffalo's to lose. And it seems unlikely that Buffalo's going to lose the division at this point. So we'll get into the details, I guess, in a minute here. But yeah, as what are just kind of your overall takeaways heading into this game as you just look at from the perspective of a team that was maybe closing the gap on Buffalo to now see just how far away they still clearly are.
Yeah, so I don't have my exact numbers handy, but I remember researching this for my own show, and this was going into the game in week 2. So add another loss to the column because of that. But I think the stat was since 2016, so when Grish Krier took over, the Dolphins it's either 4-14 or 4-15 against Buffalo. And then since they drafted Josh Allen, we're like 2-13 now. So it ain't pretty. I feel like just going to Orchard Park is sort of a scheduled beatdown at this point, just based on the last, really since we drafted Tua. There's only been a couple close games up there, and one of those was quarterbacked by Skylar Thompson in the wild card round. So it's just one of those teams. They run that too high safety, and they change their safety looks post snap, and that's just what seems to short circuit Tua, no matter which team or which coordinator. But with Buffalo, it just is magnified for him. So I'll say that, and then I'll say in the same breath, it would be the most Dolphins thing ever to finally end the streak this weekend.
Wouldn't that be just the most Dolphin thing ever to go into Buffalo and get that big win? Yes, that would be crazy. And it would be the first time since 2016 that the Miami Dolphins have won a game at Orchard Park. I put out a post from the Same Old Dolphins Show Twitter account, which you can follow at Same Old Dolphins. By the way, you can follow the show at Same Old Dolphins. You can follow Kevin at MD4 on Twitter, and you can follow me. You could follow me if you wanted to on Twitter, but I don't really use the Amplified to Rock handle anymore on Twitter. You can find me on Blue Sky at amplifiedtorock.bsky.social if you're on Blue Sky. But I put out a picture from 2016, and it was me holding up a beer to the camera, wearing my Zach Thomas jersey, big old goofy grin on my face, Christmas lights in the background. And I said, people, can you guess what event preceded this photo? And it was the Dolphins walking off the Bills in overtime in Orchard Park. That was after the 57-yard run by Jay Ajayi.
Andrew Franks hits the late field goal to tie the game late in regulation. Then after I can't remember who the kicker was for the Bills, misses the field goal. The field goal first. Wasn't it a former Dolphin kicker that Buffalo had at that time? Was Dan Carpenter still there?
Yeah, well, I think it was Dan Carpenter. Misses the field goal, and then in overtime, so that then the Dolphins go down the field. It ends up being a couple of possessions, but Jay Ajayi rips off a 57-yard run, putting him over 200 yards for the day. And Matt, you could say it's Matt Moore leads the Dolphins to an overtime victory, but the Dolphins got the win thanks to the field goal there. And then the following day, Kansas City would beat the Denver Broncos, which would allow the Dolphins to clinch a playoff spot for the first time
Happier
since
times.
2008. So it was a much different time, I guess. Although the Dolphins have made the playoffs the last 2 years, but just looking at where we sit right now with the Dolphins being 2-5, playoffs seem like very, very far away. Postscript, as it happens, Matt Moore was the quarterback for the Dolphins that day because 2 weeks earlier, Ryan Tannehill had suffered a knee injury after taking a hit in a game, and it ended his season. Do you know off the top of your head who put the hit on Ryan Tannehill that put him out for this season?
Current Miami Dolphin Calais Campbell.
That's absolutely right. So it's funny how it all comes full circle. So we're going to talk about what the Dolphins need to do to hopefully defeat the Buffalo Bills against all odds this weekend. But before we do that, a reminder to everybody, if you're not doing so already, to make sure you subscribe to the Same Old Dolphin Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, everywhere you get your podcast. Make sure you have subscribed to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. If you're watching this on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel right now, go ahead and smash that like button if you would. We appreciate it very much. If you're watching on the I Am a Miami Dolphin fan Facebook page, shout out to you. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead and smash that like button as well. Make sure you're visiting DolphinsTalk.com each and every day. It's your one-stop shop for all things Miami Dolphins. And finally, let's have a word from our sponsor.
The DolphinsTalk.com podcast network is sponsored by Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive, Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship it to you. International fans, too. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's caneswear.com, caneswear.com.
Oh, man. I miss how my voice sounds when I'm not like I am right now. But all right, let's get into it. We've put it off long enough. Kevin, we've got to talk about this game. So first, we'll talk about the stipulations. We sort of touched on it earlier. Dolphins are sitting here at 2-5, actually still in second place in the AFC East as of now. If the Jets defeat the Texans today, the Jets would technically, I think, on percentage points, go ahead of the Dolphins, temporarily at least. But the Dolphins are 2-5. Buffalo is sitting there at 6-2 right now. So basically, the way that you look at it is, if the Dolphins have any hope at all at doing something this season, they basically need to win this game. I mean, it's hard to imagine that there's any way forward for this team if they should fall to 2-6. The division would essentially be gone. If they were 2-6, they'd be 4.5 games out behind Buffalo, which would actually be 5.5 games because Buffalo will have swept them. And so they'd be 2-6 with 9 games left and basically 5.5 games. I mean, it's like the math is like absurd. So like there's basically no chance at the division. And at that point, you're looking at really kind of having to win out, maybe with one other opportunity to lose a game before you're looking at not being able to make the playoffs, especially because you've lost games to Indianapolis, who's one of those teams ahead of you. And there was another team in the AFC that they lost to as well. I
think everybody they lost to is behind them. Tennessee and
one of them too. So
England, yeah.
So it's not a great situation. So basically, as tall of an order as it is for the Dolphins to win this game in Buffalo, if they don't manage to win this game, I mean, at that point, it wouldn't surprise me. And I mentioned this in conversation with my brother, as he's been traveling. I mentioned to him, I said, it would not surprise me at all if the Miami Dolphins have been having conversations with teams. Like, teams have been calling Chris Greer about players, about, the Dolphins moving pieces. And the Dolphins have said, well, we're not ready to do that. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. But if they go into Buffalo and they lose this game, I think Chris Greer might be calling some folks back and moving some pieces, because at that point, it's time to move into, let's see what we can get out of the movable pieces that we have so that we can sort of start preparing for next season. Because that's basically where they're at if they lose this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they're lucky, you still have to win 7 out of the last 10 to get you to 9-8, which maybe gets you in. And that seems like a pretty tall order with a trip to Buffalo. You still have at Green Bay on a short week, at Houston. You got 2 games to end the year that are going to be sub 40 temperatures. McDaniel's
got to go to LA next week.
Yeah, you're 0-7 in those sub 40 temp games under McDaniel. So, I mean, 6 wins feels like about the max they're going to get to this year, unfortunately. Yeah, it feels like a scheduled beatdown is incoming. Sunday at 1:00.
It really does. It really feels rough, but let's look at it. Let's do our best to look at the nuts and bolts and figure out what the Dolphins need to do. We'll start on offense, because that's where I think there's a lot of optimism. At least there's some optimism right now coming out of the game against Arizona, because the offense was functional again with Tua, and for the most part, it looked like what you would expect the Mike McDaniel offense to look like. And when McDaniel was committing to the run, the offensive line was actually doing pretty well in creating some space for Achane, and the very rare opportunities that Jalen Wright was in the game. They looked good from that perspective. And then Tua, with the quick release and getting the ball out and hitting his receivers, it was like, oh, this is what this offense is supposed to look like. I think there was a lot of sloppiness in that last game. and that has been kind of a signature of Mike McDaniel's team, is that there is a great deal of sloppiness in the way that the team operates. But we know that the offense can function. The trick here for me, Kevin, and maybe you can speak to this in more specific terms, is that Buffalo seems to, defensively at least, have a way of short-circuiting Tua and the Dolphins offense, because their whole game is they are going to make you be patient, calm, and dink and dunk. They're going to make you need to be systematic. They're going to need, they want to force you to put together a 12, 13, 14 play drive to move the ball down the field. And what we have seen, at least in the past, now 5-6 encounters where Mike McDaniel's offense has gone up against the Buffalo Bills team coached by Sean McDermott, Mike McDaniel has a very hard time staying patient and sticking to working against the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I would say for me, the two big keys, if they're going to pull off this upset, would be, number one, it's the obvious one, the turnovers. I mean, I guess you would call the one where they had the fumbled snap through the end zone, which is just ridiculous. Cost you 2 points and you lose a game by 1. So that's bad. Buffalo leads the NFL in turnover differential, and they've got the third most takeaways of every team. They only have 3 giveaways on the season. So they're great at getting themselves opportunities. And you go back to the week 2 matchup, how many short fields did Miami give them? Like, that was kind of the one time you actually played pretty solid defense against them, held them 3 out of 9 on third downs, but they were only going 35, 40 yards to get to the end zone. And then I think, to your point, McDaniel just, and this has been a pet peeve of mine for, about a year now, going back to the end of last year, is just chasing the game flow. Like, go back to week 2, they had that 4th down in the middle of the field right before half. You can punt, pin them deep. You get the ball to start the second half, I believe. And you didn't. And then James Cook rips a 49-yarder. Now you're down by 17. So just the decisions like that have been bad. It's not a very well-coached team. Like, had the one safety last week, but there were 3 other fumbles, 2 more of which were by Tua. And I think Arizona has kind of shown you the new in vogue way of stopping the Dolphins offense. You kind of go back to 2022 with what the Chargers did on that Sunday night game and what Fred Warner did the week after. The Cardinals were basically just spamming the middle of the field on passing downs. They would put Buda Baker in the middle. They either would have robbers come down on either seam or a copper drop back on either seam, and you're basically forcing, and the corners play off. I'll give Arizona credit. Their corners tackled very, very well. Greg Dortch especially just forced you to throw into the flat or forced you to take a secondary wheel route to someone like Alec Ingle to beat you. You couldn't get the ball to Hill, couldn't get the ball to Waddle. You had some drops. And I think that's just kind of the formula. And McDaniel sort of lost that touch and ability to get things open. And then when you have to play, I won't say the offensive line's been a problem this year, certainly much less of a problem than I think the majority of the fan base was expecting, although Chris Greer's comments sure don't, do anything but stoke the fires there. But because of the nature of how quick you have to get these dropbacks going, you can't do a lot of traditional play action stuff and get those deep shots over the middle. And I think Buffalo, throughout Tua's career has been exemplary of taking away the middle of the field. You go back through these, 5 years of games against them. I can think of 2 deep shots, both in the year 2022 to Jalen Waddle. You had the big one in the home game and the big one in the snow road game. And that's been about it. And they take away Tyreek Hill. They tackle well. They put pressure on Tua no matter what rotation they have. And he doesn't seem to play well against this defense. And I think McDaniel's too quick to go away from the run. You look at it last week, 38 pass attempts. You had 3 other dropbacks where Tua scrambled. So 41 passing attempts to 22 rushing attempts. But your yards per carry was 6, and your yards per attempt was 6.3. So you're running the ball almost as well as you were passing it. And that 2-to-1 ratio is not going to play well Sunday. And Buffalo's run defense for what it is isn't that great. So,
right. And so it leads me to believe that, if the Dolphins can establish the run, and they should be able to do that, and they can stick with it,
Mhm.
they're going to be able to have some success offensively. And it makes me think back to the game where I think the Dolphins looked their best at Buffalo, which coincidentally was the snowy game the week before Christmas, I think in 22, when the Dolphins were really looked like they were going to win that game in Buffalo, and they were running the ball so well. And then in the second half, Buffalo decided they were going to commit to stopping the run, and so McDaniel went away from it, and the rest is history. And the Dolphins end up falling short late in the game. So it really becomes a question of whether McDaniel, and this has been another thing that has always kind of bugged me about McDaniel, is that something will be working, and he is so into the philosophical and conceptual side of the game. He spends so much time living in that part of the game that if I do this, they'll do this, so then I can do that. Right.
And we should run a jet sweep to Jonnu Smith on 2nd and 10.
Right.
Yeah.
So much time he's playing these chess games that oftentimes are just in his head. But what happens is a team decides that they're going to shift how they're playing, how their defense is playing, because they want to make it, they're going to stack the box. So now McDaniel, if a team stacks the box, is just going to refuse to try to run into that. And he's going to say, well, then I'm immediately going to shift to pass the ball because they're opening themselves up to that. And then, as we've seen in the past, things break down for one reason or another. And he is not, I don't know. He plays these games. He's almost like competing against himself in some ways, the way that he manages games. And as a result, he ends up going away from what is working, and the Dolphins end up losing. And so this is a situation where he can't do that. He has to basically kind of coach a perfect game on offense. And there is something to be said about taking what the defense is giving you, but there's also something to be said for when you're doing something and it's working, to keep doing it, even though the other team is trying to stop it. Just because they're changing the way they look to make you think that they're going to stop it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to.
I think about that example in the Colts game when you were running the ball down the field and then for whatever reason get to the red zone and feel it necessary to give Alec Ingold the ball and he fumbles and costs you a scoring opportunity in a game you lost by one score.
Right. So. Vintage. It's vintage. It's those, and not to say that everybody else on the Dolphins is perfect or anything like that, but it's just one of those things. It's like, it's one of those things that drives me crazy about McDaniel. So whether if he can resist the urge to do that, and the Dolphins can execute on offense and find something that is working and continue to stick with it, they're going to have a chance to put points on the board against Buffalo. Because the fact of the matter is, as much as Sean McDermott is kind of hailed as this great defensive coach, Buffalo's defense this year is, I don't think, as strong and locked down as it has been in the past. Now, that said, they're getting Von Miller back, and this is a team that has managed to shut the Dolphins down regardless of who was playing, even if they weren't fully healthy. And they're coming into this game about as healthy as they've been as a defensive unit against the Dolphins in some time. So maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree on that. But
no, I don't think so. I think, and to me, this will be a very specific analogy that I'm not sure how many listeners or watchers will get this, but
I'm fired up for it. Let's go.
They remind me a lot, and people forget about this because of how good this team's offense was, but they remind me of the 2005 Cincinnati Bengals. Led the NFL in takeaways. I think they were top 5, top 7 in sacks. You look at Buffalo right now, third most takeaways. I think they're 7th or 8th in sacks with a bunch of other teams right at 20. They're hitting the big plays. They're statistically, they're not great against the run. Pass defense, they're, average, middle of the pack. But look at points per game and turnovers and takeaways. They limit your possessions. They don't let you score. Bend but don't break, and they make big plays. And that's kind of just kind of been that way for the last 2 years, really, in my eyes, with Buffalo. They're not a dominant defense, but they can stranglehold you into making mistakes. And I think McDaniel, just like you said, he climbs up that tree every time.
He really plays right into what they want him to play into.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's pivot to see about the other side of the ball, because this is where I think this is the thing that gives me nightmares, because Buffalo's offense is really rounding into form. One of the things in the early kind of, as Josh Allen was really sort of becoming Josh Allen, the big kind of knock on the Buffalo Bills was that they really didn't have a run game to speak of. Their run game was Josh Allen using his legs and making plays. But now, with James Cook, it seems that not only have they found a running back, they've also found an ability to commit to the run. And maybe this was as simple as moving on from Ken Dorsey. And now Brady's offense is much more inclined to run the ball. But you now have a well-balanced attack on offense from Buffalo. You now have Josh Allen, who is not trying to force the ball to Stephon Diggs. I don't think we have fully seen what this offense is going to be like once Amari Cooper is fully integrated. He's only been with the team, a week and a half. He's played a couple of games with them, but we started to see, interestingly enough, in the game against Seattle, is that having Amari Cooper on the field actually opens things up more for Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman to do damage, not to mention their two tight ends in Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. Buffalo has a lot of weapons on offense, and that's without even mentioning the fact that they've got one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, the freakish athlete along the lines of Josh Allen. You look at what Kyler Murray did to the Dolphins last week, and, Josh Allen is a superhero version of that, of Kyler Murray. And so, you look at this, and I look at this Dolphins defense, which I think had been largely overrated for most of the season anyway, before they were exposed last week against Arizona. And I have my doubts about how this team is going to manage to slow Buffalo down, frankly.
I think kind of the one stat that you can hang your hat on is their third down defense has been pretty lights out most of the year. Even against Buffalo back in week 2, they held the Bills out of three conversions out of 9 attempts, which is pretty good. Arizona certainly had their way with them last week, and I thought Anthony Weaver called one of his worst games of the season. If Javon Holland doesn't play, and he hasn't practiced either day so far this week, that means you have to play with Jordan Poyer, which means you have to play defense with 10 men. I don't think there's been a bigger downgrade from going from Deshaun Elliott to Jordan Poyer. He's been an absolute disaster. And something tells me that he's going to get picked on in his little homecoming or whatever he's going to call this. The other problem is Miami tied for the second fewest sacks in the NFL. Only Atlanta has fewer. You don't have Jalen Phillips, who, played a pretty darn good game, individually back in week 2, and has always kind of had success against, I can't remember the right tackle for Buffalo, the big tall guy from like Northern Iowa or whatever, Spencer Brown has always kind of done well against him. You don't have that. If you're looking for something interesting to watch, I would watch Chop Robinson against Deion Dawkins, because Chop Robinson, the foot speed is there, the get off is there, the footwork is there, but he plays football like he has no arms. And Deion Dawkins, I think, has developed one of the best snatch and trap moves. So it wouldn't surprise me if you end up looking with Chop Robinson looking like he's in a hockey fight with his jersey up over his helmet at some point. It's been a tough go for Chop. You can kind of see him putting it together, but I think he's going to have another rough outing this Sunday. And if you blitz Josh Allen, he's going to make you pay. And I just don't know how you slow him down with the horses that Miami has, or the guys that you're missing are missing. They've stopped the run fairly well when Sealer and Campbell have been on the field together, but I don't think Sealer's going to play. So it's going to be one of those where, kind of like the wild card game, you better hope for an overthrow or an underthrow because of the wind. You better hope for a special teams muffed punt or a turnover like that or something if you want to have any shot. I think I have a hard time seeing Miami hold them under 30 points, to be completely honest.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And we're seeing that it was always a question of what was the depth on the defensive line going to look like for the Miami Dolphins just coming into the season. That was before Phillips got hurt, and before Sealer fractured his orbital bone. And now we've lost Phillips for the year. It seems unlikely that Sealer is going to play on Sunday. I suppose it's possible that he could be fitted for a mask and something like that, and he could go out there, but it seems to me fairly risky that he's going to go out there, with a fractured orbital bone. And so now you don't have Sealer, you don't have Phillips. Calais Campbell, I mean, let's call it for what it is. I think he's been basically heroic in terms of what you've gotten out of him. I think even the most optimistic Dolphin fan would have to be impressed with what they've gotten out of Calais Campbell this year. But again, Calais Campbell is, at this point in his career, is best in small doses. He's best when he doesn't have to be out there the whole game. And when you're running him out there, or you're pulling him off, and then it's Deshaun Hand and it's Benito Jones, it's like you're not generating any pressure. And against Josh Allen, the key is you've got to be able to generate pressure without bringing the blitz. And we saw last week against Arizona that Miami could do nothing to get any pressure on Kyler Murray unless they were bringing extra men. And even when they were doing that, they couldn't get home. And Kyler Murray was basically, having a field day, finding Trey McBride or Marvin Harrison or Michael Wilson or whoever downfield. And as we mentioned before, Josh Allen is a significantly better player than Kyler Murray is. And, and then you deal with the fact that Josh Allen has a career 110 passer rating against Miami. And so for whatever reason, that the Dolphins are the team that Josh Allen will always go off against. Meanwhile, he has, and this is according to Barry Jackson, has an 84.4 and 85.2 quarterback rating against the Jets and Patriots. There's something about the Dolphins where he just goes Super Saiyan and just blows up.
Yeah, I think too, last week, Arizona kind of got a bead pretty early of when Jalen Ramsey was coming and how they were aligning him. And then later Marcus May, which, I talked about this all off season. If you're going to blitz May and you don't have Javon Holland healthy, you have to play Jordan Poyer as a middle of the field safety, which at this point, he's the worst middle of the field safety in the entire league. You look at that final drive that Arizona had, the 3rd and 1, who's the middle of the field safety? It's Jordan Poyer, and they run a corner out to Trey McBride, and he just has no shot. If Kyler Murray puts the ball closer to the numbers instead of the sideline, it's probably a touchdown and the game's over right there. I think we were just calling the game shorthanded. I thought, at least back in week 2, he had a pretty good plan for their run game. I think they only gave up like 108 yards, and 49 of that came off the one play where David Long shot the wrong gap, and Poyer, let's call it what it is, made several business decisions that night, as he has made all year. And, I thought they had a good plan, but that plan had Jalen Phillips in it. You had a healthy David Long in it. You don't have that now. Emmanuel Ogbo's playing with a torn bicep, so he's essentially playing with one arm. You're just, it's going to be that kind of game. And I think it's if you're a fan out there that's hoping for the playoffs, just hope they can rebound for Monday Night Football against the Rams, because I think this is a beatdown waiting to happen.
So maybe the thing is to hope that the streak can start the following week, because it just seems very unlikely that it's going to happen here. And then, not to get ahead of ourselves, but we can keep an eye on this new knee injury that caused Puka Nacua to leave practice early today. But we can We'll worry about that next week because we still have a game to look forward to this Sunday. And so it's time for everybody we'll get into predictions shortly, but first it's time for everybody to give us their one hot take. So if you're watching us live in the I'm a Miami Dolphin fan Facebook page or the DolphinsTalk YouTube channel, let us know in the comments, what is your one hot take for Dolphins at Bills this Sunday? I will go first because mine is the same every time. My one hot take for Dolphins at Bills is an Alec Ingold receiving touchdown. That's my one hot take. Let's see what we've heard from our friends at Dolphins Talk Extra over in the Discord. Reminder that you can join us at Dolphins Talk Extra for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/DolphinsTalk. So get in on it. Dolphins Talk Extra. Shout out to all of our Dolphins Talk Extra subscribers. We got one from Jamie V who says, and I think you'll appreciate this, Kevin. Jamie V says Dolphins win on a walk-off Jordan Poyer pick six.
Ooh, poetic.
I mean, that is a scorching hot take.
Yeah.
Brain gave us two, so he's not exactly following the rules, but since he's not here, I'll allow it. Tua throws for more yardage and more touchdowns than Josh Allen, and Miami still loses by double digits.
We are closer to the sun than we were before.
Yes,
that's awesome.
And then the second one is Odell Beckham Jr. receiving touchdown. Let's see what we got. I'll toss it over to you here in a second, Kevin. But I want to hear what some of the folks say over here on the Twitter machine. So let's share some of them with you. Finn Phil says Dolphins held without a touchdown. I don't know that that's a terribly hot take. Jordan Murray says Malik Washington kick return for a touchdown to keep it from being a massacre. It looks like he predicts 42-14. And with the Malik Washington kick return being one of the scores. Let's see. Here's one from Mark Lever. Josh Allen throws 2 interceptions in the first half. Dolphins win in overtime with a field goal. BT Fins Fan 99 says Jalen Wright breaks a touchdown run. Tobias Hendrick, excuse me. Jonnu Smith getting 80+ yards and at least 1 touchdown. John F. Nally says game's over by halftime. Let's see. Here's one. Wiggler81 says D. Eskridge touchdown. T_Hutch says Josh Allen takes the fourth quarter off. Here's super hot take. Tua 300+ yards and a double-digit win.
Whoa.
This is one I don't know how hot this take is from Matthew Platisha, but he says Tua stays conscious the entire game. Yikes.
Although fair, he's had some pretty monstrous injuries.
Yeah, it's true. And against the Bills, it's not unusual.
Broken ribs
and the 305 until I die says Cam Smith interception.
Okay.
What do you got for us, Kevin?
Well, hold on. Let's back up. Who was the one who said kick return or punt return? Was that Jordan Murray?
Oh, that's Jordan Murray. Says touchdown for Malik Washington.
Okay. So without looking it up, some quick trivia. I was actually pretty staggered when I saw this today. In terms of kickoff returns, so yardage on a return, did you know the Dolphins are in the top 10 in the NFL?
This year?
This year.
In yardage per kickoff return? That's interesting. Is it because of the couple of returns that we had from Malik Washington last week?
Probably. They are also top 5 in punt return yardage.
Is that because of D. Eskridge last week?
I think Berrios had the 44-yarder a couple of weeks
that's right.
ago.
He did have one good punt return.
The Danny Crossman dark arts are alive and well.
Yeah.
My hot take, if we're ready for it.
We're ready for it. Oh, yes.
Okay. Is that in some capacity, Skylar Thompson takes snaps on Sunday.
Oh man.
And if not him, if he's not active, then CJ Beathard takes snaps on Sunday.
That would be something. So. Let's see. Let's see what we got. Here's we have some in the chat here from David de Gaffenried. We've got a Sanders 3 field goals. Garrett Graham
okay.
says Waddle, first touchdown of the season.
He's
Here's
always
one.
had
Here's
some
a
pretty
hot
decent
one.
games against the Bills. I like that take from
Yeah.
Garrett.
Here's a hot one from Armando Swaim.
Ooh.
Ethan Bonner sack.
Scorching. Will he be active?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. We'll find out. Let's see. And yeah, I think that's it. So that's what we've got in the chat today. We've got we got one late from Telly Nation.
Mhm.
Dolphins win by 2 touchdowns. That would be a scorching hot take. That would be a shock to the system if the Dolphins won this game. I think basically what it all boils down to, and we've kind of told you about what the Dolphins, we think they need to do on either side of the ball to win this game. Basically, this is a classic example of the only way the Dolphins win this game is that they have to go out and play absolutely perfect, clean football on both sides of the ball. They've got to go out there and play their best possible game, and they've got to hope that the Bills do not. And that's basically the only way the Dolphins win this game.
Flow lets you run the ball at least 35 times. Like, you need to be able to score early and control the clock if you have any hope. And that's just not a McDaniel special.
No, it is. It's not. So that's why I sit here and I go, I don't know if this is going to happen, but I guess all that's left to do is to wait and see and hope for the best. It's going to be, I think it could very well be a long Sunday. Hopefully we'll be surprised. Hopefully the Dolphins will go out there and really show us something on Sunday, but like I said, I'm not going to be holding my breath on that. So before we wrap up, Kevin, tell the people where they can find you and what you got going on.
Yeah, so you can still find me on Dolphins Talk Weekly. Usually try and record that a day after every Dolphins game, although work schedule has been crazy, so we've missed the Colts post game. But find me there on Twitter at KevinMD4, and I have an Instagram account now, but I can't remember what my handle is. I think it might be KevinMD4 as well. So, but mostly I'm on Twitter if I'm on social media. So,
excellent. Well, we'll encourage everybody to go follow Kevin on Twitter. It's good stuff. If you're gonna engage with Kevin though on Twitter, make sure you're reading what he says and not putting your own thoughts and opinions onto his words. That's just throwing that out there.
Where's my guy, Didal Storm or whatever his name is? So
yeah,
shout out to you, sir.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, it's Twitter. What do you expect? So, yeah. So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Kevin, for coming to hang out and stepping in for Aaron the Brain. Aaron,
thanks for having me.
Back. Yeah, no problem. Glad to do it. It's been a little while since we've had you on the show, so it's good to have you back. Aaron should be back for Monday's show, reacting to the game. He is probably now just a few hours away from arriving in Central New York, so we're really excited about that. If you are a Dolphins Talk Extra subscriber, the Brain actually dropped an episode for you today. He dropped an episode from the road, kind of giving you an update on his travels. There's a little bit of a food review in there, and then he talks a little bit about the current state of the Miami Dolphins as well. So if you're not a Dolphins Talk Extra subscriber, we invite you to join us at patreon.com/Dolphins Talk for as little as $3 a month, and you get access to bonus shows. You get access to our Discord server and a lot of other fun stuff as well. We got another contest coming up soon with a cool prize. So yeah, come hang out and check it out. We'll be back with a new episode of the Same Old Dolphins Show, exclusively live for Dolphins Talk Extra subscribers, but it will be in your podcast feeds as normal at the usual time, and will be available on YouTube after the fact as well. So as always, thank you for listening, and that's going to wrap it up. We'll see you on Monday. Hopefully the Dolphins can pull out a win. In the meantime, and until then, take care of yourselves and each other. And as always, go Dolphins!